These are the days of thunder. I am your host, John Nada. I want to take a minute to apologize for the length of time it's taken to come out with a new segment. I've been pretty busy with some things going on, but needless to say, those things are past now, done and over with, and moving on to the next stage. So, um, all in all, everything's well. I had a thought. You know, Majority of the time, really none of these have been scripted. This is a lot of it's been off the cuff and whatever thought comes to mind. But I happened to speak with a friend of mine the other day, an old buddy of mine from college, real great guy, but just very blue pill, very for many years has been stuck in that mindset. And in this conversation, I started to see that he himself is somewhat familiar with MGTOW. I don't know if he's ever listened to any of these podcasts. Or if he's listening. I've given him some resources of some other podcasts, the ones that got me started and really explained the whole phenomenon. But needless to say, I think he's kind of come to this in a way that many of us came to it just kind of on our own and just kind of had this. I can't say that I had this great epiphanous moment. It was just a lot. A lot of it was little by little until one day everything just sort of clicked. But it wasn't this like instantaneous thing. And so having this conversation with him, I've begun to see that he has had, or he's at least in the beginning stages of swallowing the red pill if he hasn't already. And I had mentioned something about it on one of the other segments, but needless to say, he had dated this girl. Things went kind of sour, and so we ended up kind of talking about that. And I didn't prompt him to talk about it. He actually brought it up on his own and called the girl a bitch, which was really surprising coming from him because he usually isn't the kind of person to say a bad thing about anybody. And uh, she was living about an hour away from where he was, and of course he was making all the effort to see her and trying to at the same time working two jobs and trying to fit her into his life. And so I guess one of the reasons why she wanted to break up with him was she felt like he wasn't doing enough to make ends meet. And he just, flat out thought that was ridiculous. Here he was working two jobs and trying to shoulder the burden of being the sole person, going to and fro to make the visits possible and to make spending time together possible. And she really wasn't bringing anything to the table. And he mentioned something about this laundry list of requirements that she had, how she thought things should be and this, that, and the other. And of course, we know now, those of us that know these things, that it's AWOL. They're all like that. They all have a laundry list of things. And I don't know. The interesting thing about it was this girl was not particularly attractive. I didn't think she was certainly not attractive enough to be making demands and having this laundry list. And she really wasn't even attractive enough to spend an hour to go visit, to be quite honest with you. But this was my friend's first real serious. I guess it was serious. It just kind of sounded like your run of the mill relationship to me. But for him, this was his first, big serious relationship. And so I say all that to say this, and those of you that you see it in comments everywhere. The awakening is beginning. It's in the full throes of beginning. And something that I've found, just as time has gone on, just how uninterested I am in relationships. The last girl that I dated, and it was kind of like an off and on thing because honestly, I really think this person had mental problems and needed to either be on something or see a therapist or something. And I can go into uh, a longer story about that. I think I've already talked a little bit about it before, but this person had actually spent some time in a psych ward for I think it was about 3 weeks, and they had gotten some therapy, which is how they ended up in the psych ward. And of course, I didn't find any of this out until we had already gone out a few times. I'd stuck my dick in crazy and all this. So, needless to say, and then it was just like a constant like I don't so much think they were bipolar as much as I think they had borderline personality disorder. I mean, just to a T. And just the level of attention that they needed was just, and of course they didn't see anything wrong with this. But I mean, they didn't feel the need to give that level of attention back. And of course, whenever it was kind of brought up, like, well, why do you expect me to show you all this attention, and yet you don't show me the same amount? I mean, I'm the one that does the majority of the calling and texting. Well, you have to tell me what you need. And of course, that was all bullshit. She didn't care about me. She didn't care about making me feel validated or whatever, or making me feel as if she cared. Everything was about her because of her, again, probably a lot to do with some sort of mental problem, but everything was about how she needed to be validated and how she needed this attention. And I mean constant attention. Constant attention. And just constantly, something she said a lot is how lonely she felt. Even though we were in a relationship. And I guess, I don't know, I guess I wasn't doing enough to validate her. I wasn't just around the clock dropping everything I was doing and just making her the center of my world. But I mean, quite honestly, I wasn't that interested in her. And I had done this for girls in the past when I was younger and dumber, and realized that, the relationships that were like that, they never ended up working out because the girl just got bored. And it didn't matter how insecure they were or how lonely they may have been. I mean, you give them too much attention, and then the whole thing just falls apart. And so I say all that to say this. It's just, I mean, I've talked to a few girls here and there. It's not really that difficult. As you get older and you really realize how things operate, it's not difficult to get a girlfriend. It's not even really difficult to sleep with somebody. But it's just almost anticlimactic, because the majority of the women I meet nowadays, I mean, they're not, um, a lot of it's makeup, and they don't even look as good as they um, present themselves to be. A lot of it's just, you know fake, for lack of a better word. But then on top of that, none of them are really all that interesting to talk to. I mean, this last girl, I don't think we had one interesting conversation. I mean, I'm very interested in the paranormal. I love Art Bell when he was on Coast to Coast and all that, and I'll even listen to George Norrie occasionally. And just the whole concept of ghosts and UFOs, I've always been fascinated with that as a kid. And with this girl, as with other girls in the past, although I have met some girls that were interested in this, she was just so afraid of the thing, afraid of those kinds of things, that she didn't even want to have a conversation about it. So it's like, oh well, that you know kind of shuts down one thing I'm interested in. She wasn't particularly interested in politics or anything, didn't know anything about it, and wasn't interested in talking about it. Anytime we had to, try to have any kind of conversation about religion, that would immediately get shut down because she was just so easily offended. And my degree is in the theological field, and um, so obviously, religion has been something that's been of interest to me since I was 8 years old. And so it's just like, well, what do we talk about? And her big interest was makeup. She was big into doing makeovers for people and stuff, which is fine. Everybody has their own hobbies and things. And then the other thing was, her brother was in some way or another involved in the music industry, and I mean, I use the term music loosely because what he was producing was, in my opinion, was not very musical at all. But and so, her big thing was celebrities. Other than the makeup, it was celebrities and Kanye West and this, that, and the other, and basically stuff that is of no interest to anybody, that is, a thinker on any level. Because these are all people that, I mean, that are basically on the level of Milli Vanilli and was it Vanilla Ice, and those types. Uh, they're popular in their time, but they don't stand the test of time, like other things do. Like I don't know, Iron Maiden or Mozart or things like that. So it's just become very boring. I mean, even the sex is boring because let's face it, most women just lay there and like with this one girl, there wasn't even any foreplay or lead up to it. It was just clothing off um, and that was it. And they just kind of laid there, and it wasn't even um, really all that great. And so I don't know. It's just not appealing. I mean, I would rather have my time and uh, resources and be able to come and go as I please. And what some people see as security in a relationship, I just see as slavery. I mean, and most of the time, the woman's not really interested in anything that has to do with you, your dreams, your hopes, your aspirations, your needs as a person. Everything's about them and their validation. And so I think more and more people are realizing this, and it just to me like I would just rather not date somebody. And if sex happens, it happens. But even that is just kind of anymore. It's just kind of like, well, okay, whatever. I mean, it's not the end all be all like it seemed to be when you're in your late teens, early 20s. A lot of that has to do with age, but a lot of that has to do with you know realizing the hoops and the dangers. The hoops one has to jump through and the dangers to really just get something that's not even really all that cracked up to begin with. Um, some mediocre woman who really brings nothing to the table and it's just mediocre in looks and everything else, and yet you're supposed to jump through these flaming hoops, to get her, and it's just I don't know. As the old saying goes, the game is not worth the candle. It's just there's other things that you could put your time, energy, and effort into that would yield greater results and greater rewards than some girl that's really got an overinflated view of herself because of the cultural phenomenon that's been going on for the past 2 or 3 decades. And people are waking up to it, and men are waking up to this and walking away in droves, and it's being noticed now. And so now it seems like the pendulum might swing the other direction. But I think you have to keep your wits about you and realize that it's all a game in the end, and the game is to get you back on the plantation. The game is to get you to go back to the roles that you've left and to give up your freedom. Well, this has been the Days of Thunder, and as always, you're free to do as you're told. And everybody, thanks for the support. Until next time.